19 red tomatoes in 9 days. That is what I counted off one plant in my own backyard 2 summers ago, standing over the raised bed with a notepad like a fool because that same plant had been sitting there stubborn and green since the middle of August. 40 green tomatoes hanging on it, 11 ripe ones to show for the whole season up to that point. I did not spray anything on it. I did not buy one new product. And I did not strip the leaves off to let the sun get at the fruit, which is the exact thing I'd been told to do for 20 years. But that is when I found out that a tomato does not ripen the way almost everybody thinks it does. I changed 3 things about heat, about feeding, and about when I picked, and all 3 of them were free. Today, I am going to walk you through every one of them right there at the plant so you can go out and do it this afternoon. And stay with me to the end, because the single biggest reason a tomato quits turning red is one specific thing heat does to the red pigment inside that fruit. There is an exact temperature where it shuts off, and nobody ever tells you what it is. I'm Steve Calloway. I have been growing food in the same Midwest backyard for more than 20 years, in raised beds and in-ground rows on a regular suburban lot. For most of those years, I have run side-by-side test beds and written down what actually happened, which is the only reason I know any of this. My first garden was a jungle of green that gave me about a dozen tomatoes all summer. My wife Karen keeps the harvest log now, and these days the trouble is giving the tomatoes away fast enough. Here is the situation nearly every gardener I talk to in August is in. The plant looks fine. There is fruit all over it, good-sized, heavy, and every single one of them is green. And behind that green fruit, there is a clock running, because in most of this country, the first frost lands somewhere in early to middle October. And a tomato that is still green on frost night is a tomato you never got to eat. I ran the numbers in my own harvest log one year, and the plant that set 40 fruits and ripened 12 threw away almost 30 pounds of tomatoes. 30 pounds. That is a winter of sauce and a shelf of canning jars sitting right there on the vine, going nowhere. Now, when that happens, there are 2 things a gardener reaches for. He strips the leaves off to let the sunshine hit the fruit, and he pours on more fertilizer to give the plant a push. Both of those things slow ripening down instead of speeding it up, and I have the side-by-side rows to prove it. And both of them go wrong for the same underlying reason, which is the heat thing I promised you at the start. Hold on to that, because it is the whole key, and I will lay it out completely before we are done. Now, everything I'm about to show you at this plant is one piece of a bigger system, and I wrote that whole system down day by day in a book called Steve's 30-Day Maximum Yield Protocol. It runs 115 pages, and it is the exact 30-day protocol I follow in this backyard to roughly double what every plant produces from soil preparation straight through harvest. Inside it, you will find the big 7 yield killers, which is how I diagnose a garden that is working hard and giving back nothing. You will find how to feed for fruit instead of foliage. And you will find the strategic pruning that feels completely wrong the first time you do it and multiplies your production anyway. You do not need 1 extra square foot of ground, and you do not need any expensive equipment. It works in raised beds, in in-ground plots, and in containers. It is $17 right now, marked down from $47. $17 against a garden that finally pays for itself. Now go ahead and grab your phone and open up your camera, the same one you use to take pictures. Point it at that square code on your screen and hold it steady for a second. A little link will pop up, give it a tap, and it will take you straight to the book. And if you're watching on your phone right now, the link is waiting for you right down below in the description. Take your time. There is no rush at all. I'll wait right here. So let's start with those leaves, because that is the mistake I made the longest. Sunlight does not ripen a tomato. I know how wrong that sounds. Every one of us was taught to open the plant up and let the sun get at the fruit. But the fruit is not solar powered. A tomato ripens because it makes its own gas inside itself called ethylene, and that gas is what flips the switch from green to red. The trigger is internal. Temperature controls how fast it runs. Sunshine on the skin of the fruit does not enter into it. What the leaves actually do is make sugar. Every leaf on that plant is a little solar panel, and the sugar it makes is what fills and flavors the fruit hanging underneath it. Cut off a third of the leaves and you have cut off a third of the sugar factory. The tomato comes out smaller, it tastes flatter, and it ripens slower, not faster. There is a second problem too. A bare tomato in full afternoon sun gets sun scald, which is a pale, papery, sunken patch on the shoulder of the fruit that never colours up and never comes back. I tested this myself. 2 rows of the same variety planted the same day. The stripped row ripened 4 days later on average, and I threw out 9 fruits with scald on them. The row I left alone gave me the tomatoes that went in the log. So here is the only pruning I do late in the season. Take off any leaf that has gone yellow. Take off any leaf that is touching the soil. That is where you stop. Everything above the lowest fruit cluster stays right where it is. And that leaf shade is doing more for you than you know, which brings us straight back to that heat number I promised you. That handles the leaves, but it leaves you with a second problem, and this one is sitting in the fertilizer bag out in the shed. Nitrogen is the first number on that bag, and nitrogen tells a tomato plant one thing: grow, make stems, make leaves, get bigger. That is exactly what you want in June, and it is the last thing you want in August. A plant still getting a heavy dose of nitrogen keeps pushing green growth, and it will hold its fruit half finished while it does it. That was my first garden. A beautiful green jungle, and about a dozen tomatoes to show for the whole summer. What a ripening tomato wants instead is potassium. Potassium is the third number on the bag, and it is the one that runs sugar into the fruit and builds even colour all the way across it. When a plant runs short on potassium, you get exactly what a lot of folks are looking at right now: yellow shoulders that stay hard and pale while the bottom of the fruit goes red. Blotchy, patchy colour. Fruit that ripens in pieces instead of all at once. So here is the switch, and it is a simple one. When the first fruit on the plant is about the size of a golf ball, you stop feeding nitrogen. Move to a fertilizer where the middle and last numbers are higher than the first one. I use 1 tablespoon of sulfate of potash per plant. 1 tablespoon, not a handful. Scratch it into the top inch of soil out at the edge of the leaves, then water it in well. Do that once every 2 weeks until harvest. If you would rather use what you already have on hand, a 1/4 cup of wood ash per plant does much the same work, but no more than a 1/4 cup, because ash pushes your soil pH up over time. Take your time with that one. There is no rush, and there is nothing to measure but a spoon. Now, a tomato plant does not know that winter is coming. Left alone, an indeterminate tomato, the tall kind that keeps climbing the cage all season, will set brand new blossoms right up until the frost kills it. Every one of those September blossoms is a promise the plant cannot keep. It takes roughly 40 to 60 days to go from an open flower to a ripe tomato. Count that out on the kitchen calendar from today, and you will see the problem. Any flower that opens inside about 6 weeks of your first frost is spending the plant's energy on fruit that will never finish, and it is spending it out of the very same account that is supposed to be finishing the fruit you already have. So you make the decision for the plant. About 4 weeks before your average first frost date, walk down the row with your fingers. Pinch off every open blossom. Pinch off every fruit smaller than a marble. Then find the main growing tip at the top of each vine and cut it off with your snips. About 2 leaves above the highest fruit cluster you mean to keep. That last cut is called topping, and it tells the plant the growing season is over. 4 weeks before your first frost. That is 4 weeks. And if you're not sure of your date, ask a neighbour who has gardened on your street for a long while, or look it up one time and write it on the wall of the shed in pencil, where you will find it again. What happens next is the part that surprised me the first time. Everything that plant had been spending on new growth goes into the fruit already hanging there. In my log, one afternoon of pinching and topping moved the whole plant forward by about a week and a half. There is one more thing you can quit doing, and it is the easiest one on the whole list: water. A tomato plant reads water the same way it reads nitrogen. Plenty of water means keep growing, so a plant getting a daily sprinkle from the hose in late August is being told to make more plants right at the moment you need it making red. Late in the season, I water my tomatoes 1 time a week. 1 deep soak, about 1 gallon per plant, right at the base with a soaker hose or a slow watering can. 1 gallon once a week, and then I leave it alone. That mild dry stretch in between is a signal. and the plant answers it by finishing what it is already carrying. Steady is the word that matters, though. Erratic watering. Bone dry for 10 days and then 2 inches all at once is what gives you cracked shoulders and that blotchy colour all over again. Deep and regular beats, often and shallow every time. So that is 4 things off the list. Leave the leaves alone. Switch the feeding over to potassium. Pinch and top 4 weeks out. Water deep and once a week. Every one of those is free, and not one of them costs you a whole afternoon. Now, before we get to the picking, there is one thing to check first, because sometimes there is nothing wrong with your garden at all. Every tomato variety comes with a number called days to maturity. Look at the plastic tag from the nursery or the back of the seed packet. An early variety like Early Girl runs around 55 days. A big beefsteak can run 85 to 90 days. And here is the piece that trips up nearly everybody. That number counts from the day you set the transplant into the ground, not from the day you sowed the seed and not from the day the plant flowered. So do this. Find the date you planted, add the days printed on the tag. That is the earliest honest date you should expect a red tomato. And if the calendar tells you that you are still 2 weeks out, your plant is not stalled. It is on schedule and it is doing its job. I write the transplant date on a wooden stake in permanent marker and push it into the soil beside the plant. Karen laughs at those stakes every spring. Then in August, we both go out and read them. 55 days for the early types, 85 to 90 for the big slices. Knowing your own number is the difference between fixing a real problem and worrying about one that was never there. And that brings us to the biggest single change I ever made with tomatoes, which is when I picked them. Go out and look closely at your greenest fruit. Somewhere on that plant, one tomato has a faint blush down at the bottom end, the blossom end, the end away from the stem. Not orange yet, just the green going pale and a hint of colour coming up through it. That stage has a name. Growers call it the breaker stage, and it is the most useful moment in the whole life of that fruit. Here is why it matters. When a tomato reaches the breaker, it has already taken every bit of sugar, every bit of flavour, and every bit of size it is ever going to take from that vine. The plant seals the fruit off at the stem. From that moment forward, the tomato is finishing on its own supplies, and it does not need the plant for one single thing, which means you can pick it, and you lose nothing. Not sweetness, not flavour, not texture. I ran that side by side too. Half a ball picked at the breaker and finished on the counter, half of them left out on the vine, tasted blind at the kitchen table, with Karen keeping score. Neither one of us could tell them apart. So bring them in, set them on a tray on the kitchen counter, stem side down, not touching each other, and out of direct sunlight, because a sunny windowsill is the worst place in your house for this. Then leave them be for a few days if you want them moving faster. Set a ripe banana in the bowl with them, because that banana gives off the very same ethylene gas, and your tomatoes read it as a signal. And every fruit you carry inside frees the plant to pour everything it has into the ones still hanging out there. That is how 19 tomatoes turned red in 9 days in my backyard. So why does a kitchen counter beat a garden in the last week of August? That's the thing I promised you at the start, and it is time. A tomato does not turn red because of sunlight. It turns red because it builds a pigment inside the fruit called lycopene, and lycopene is the red. There is a second pigment in there too called carotene, and carotene is the orange and the yellow. The plant builds both of them while the fruit ripens, and this is where temperature walks in the door. Lycopene, the red one, is fragile about heat. It builds beautifully between about 68 and 77 degrees. Above 85 degrees, the plant nearly stops making it. Past about 95, it stops cold. 85 degrees, that is 85, not 95, and it is a line almost nobody knows is even there. But carotene, the orange one, keeps right on working at those same temperatures. So through a stretch of 90-degree afternoons, your tomato keeps building orange and quits building red. And that is precisely what you are seeing on the vine. Fruit that sits at pale orange for 2 solid weeks. Yellow shoulders that never colour up. Blotchy, mottled ripening that looks like a disease and is nothing of the kind. That is not a soil problem. That is a thermometer problem. Now go put your hand on a tomato sitting in full, afternoon sun sometime. It is hot to the touch. A fruit in direct sun can run 10 to 15 degrees hotter than the air around it. So on an 85-degree afternoon, that exposed fruit is sitting near 100 degrees inside its own skin. And the red factory in there is closed for the day. That is why stripping the leaves backfires on you. Those leaves are shade. And that is why a 70-degree kitchen counter beats a 95-degree garden every single time. So here is what you do about it. During a heat wave, do not touch the leaves. If you see a long stretch above 90 in the forecast, stretch a 30% shade cloth over the row for that week. And it does not have to be pretty to work. And any fruit that has hit that first blush of colour, pick it and bring it into the house where the air sits between 68 and 77 degrees, because that is the range where the red actually gets built. 68 to 77 degrees. Write that on a scrap of paper and stick it on the refrigerator, because it is the whole answer. And that is exactly the kind of thing the whole protocol is built on. Tested, cheap, and written out day by day so you can just follow along. The whole thing is called Steve's 30-Day Maximum Yield Protocol. 115 pages, $17 today. Marked down from $47. $17. One season of green tomatoes that never turned cost you a great deal more than that. And if you are watching this in August, you have already paid it. Now go ahead and grab your phone and open up your camera, the same one you use to take pictures. Point it at that square code on your screen and hold it steady for a second. A little link will pop up, give it a tap, and it will take you straight to the book. And if you're watching on your phone right now, the link is waiting for you right down below in the description. Take your time. There is no rush at all. I'll wait right here. So there it is. Keep the leaves. Feed for fruit instead of foliage. Pinch and top 4 weeks before frost. Water deep. And once a week, check your days to maturity. And pick at that first blush of colour. Tell me your zone and your biggest garden frustration right now. I read every single one. Next time, I'm going to show you the one pruning cut I made back in June that decides how many tomatoes a plant can even carry all season. And it feels completely wrong the first time you do it. Get out there and get your hands dirty, and I'll see you in the garden.